Welcome, welcome, welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast. Caleb Hatch with you from the WELT studios, and Justin Kinney joining us from another undisclosed location. Where in the world is Justin Kinney today?
Where in the world am I? I am on the shores of Pensacola Bay in Pensacola Beach, Florida, our annual spring break trip down here. So wife and I brought our two kids and my son's friend who's come down with us for 5-6 years now. So enjoying the last full day here. We'll start heading home tomorrow and maybe even have to drive through some wet weather, of which that has been a lot of up in Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, there's not up here. I mean, we've just had storms off and on this week, but in central Indiana, I mean, they had tornado, I think in Carmel, and I think there was several on the west side. So it's been pretty crazy weather. You've obviously avoided that, so lucky you. And then you'll come back, and it's not going to be as nice either. So enjoy that.
No, it will not. We've enjoyed 70s. It goes to 80 all week. Had some storms earlier in the week, a couple washout days, but the last 4 or 5 days have been really, really nice. So back to reality starting tomorrow on our long trek home.
And then as punishment next weekend, you'll have to watch beautiful, sunny Southern California in the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. So, you know.
Yes, yeah, it'll be insult to injury, but looking forward to getting back on track next week.
Just gotta get to May. That's how it is in Indiana. You just have to get to May, and the weather
that's right.
is generally nice. So, speaking of May, let's talk some Indianapolis cars, you like to say. We got 3 kind of headline stories. One, Jay Frye hired as the new team president at Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. We'll touch on that. Also, the IMS Museum grand reopening took place earlier this week, so it is open. You do need to reserve tickets, so you can't just show up and take a tour, but it looks incredible. And then also, Roger Penske, as part of that grand reopening, confirmed that the new car is going to be introduced in 2027. So there is some talk of 27 or 28, so we'll touch on all those topics this week. I think we start, though, with the Jay Frye news, because that is, I think, by far the biggest going through this week. Jay Frye's new president at Rahal. And look, you go back, and I forget who pointed this out, but Graham Rahal had a tweet on Jay Frye basically singing his praises when Frye was let go by IndyCar back in February. Lo and behold, They negotiate, or at least, the partners of the team negotiate and bring him in. It's a replacement of Steve Erickson, who was kind of in a more like a CEO type role. And he was with Honda prior to that. He was with the team for a couple of years. But to get a guy like Jay Frye, who comes in with experience on obviously the IndyCar side, on the sponsorship side, the team side in NASCAR. I mean, he's kind of done all the different parts of the system, if you will. And so he's hyper experienced. He's very well respected already in the IndyCar paddock. And I feel like this is a home run hire for them to try to get back to where they were, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, you look at it and, where does this most affect the team? Is kind of how I've been thinking about it since this news came out. I mean, it's all encompassing, of course, but where is it really going to help the most? Is it going to help on the business/sponsorship side? Do we feel like it's going to help out in terms of putting people in the right positions within the team? Is it going to be maybe a lure to maybe get a higher quality of driver potentially? And that's not to take anything away from their current lineup. And of course, having, the guys they have now, but I feel like almost like you're waiting for that team to take the next step over the last couple of years. And it really started, after the struggles at Indianapolis, where Bobby Rahal, what do you call it? The 500 improvement plan or whatever.
Yes.
And we really haven't seen that improvement. And could this help them get there, right? And obviously it's going to help tremendously in the paddock, tremendously in business meetings, and tremendously with sponsorship. But I still, or kind of look at it and say, okay, is this going to be that big land to really start pushing them up the timing and scoring standings and the point standings in terms of their drivers. And you hope so. But we've kind of felt the last couple of years that other moves were going to help that, and they really haven't. So I think it's a home run hire for sure. I'm just going to be fascinated to see just where this really impacts RLL the most.
I think, to me, it's having a younger, more energized guy near the top of the food chain in the team that can kind of take on some of the responsibilities of Mike Lanigan and Bobby Rahal, so they can focus on more big picture and less day-to-day operation type stuff. And I mean, that's the role, right? It's team president. So I think that part is going to be a huge benefit. And then, I mean, look, they have great facilities, right? They have a new shop in Zionsville that houses their IndyCar operation, their sports car operation as well. So it's not like they don't have the tools, right, to be successful. It just comes down to execution. And, you know, I think the team should have seen it as a wake-up call that Christian Lundgaard left. And I get it. You have the opportunity to go to Aaron McLaren, you take it. But that should have been a wake-up call saying, hey, we're not at the level we need to be. We should be retaining a guy who's won a race for us and who's been our number one driver for a couple years. And for that to not even really be much of a negotiation, I think should have been a wake-up call. And I think getting a Jay Frye can only help in trying to retain talent and also evaluate what they have there and attract new talent to come in.
And that's where I look at it as the most important upgrade that still needs to happen at Rahal is the talent in the seats. Is, you know, we can go through, and this is no disrespect to Devlin DeFrancesco and Louis Foster. Obviously, Louis Foster's a rookie and stuff, but when you look through the last couple of years and Pietro Fittipaldi, you mentioned Christian Lundgaard, even going back to guys like Spencer Pigot and Jordan King, you know, it's just, it's just the quality hasn't been there. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm going after Graham Rahal, but I've said in the past, like the performance isn't there for him to be an alpha at a team. And I don't know if Jay Frye is the guy to have that difficult conversation and say, not that Graham Rahal's going anywhere, but just we have to really upgrade our driver lineup. Like Graham can't be the apex driver for us. We need to go after and be able to land a better quality driver/drivers. And I think Graham and Bobby have to be open to that, because I think this is based on no inside information, but, you know, how much has the team been limited in terms of luring talent and going back to Christian Lundgaard and not wanting to stay there is because Graham is the clear alpha there. And is that a potential turnoff to either drivers staying or drivers coming in? And I think that's really something they need to get past. I think there needs to be hard conversations within Rahal Letterman Lanigan and saying, where are we really not up to par compared to some of the other teams? And I think it begins, at least in my mind, in the cockpit of the cars.
You got to qualify better. That's been an ongoing issue off and on for several years now. And I mean, so far this year, they don't have a single car that's started, I think, top 12 through 2 races. Yes, guys are capable of driving through the field, but outside of, what was that, the end of 23, when after Indy they went on a tear on road and street course qualifying, it just doesn't feel like it's been there, right? So you got to qualify better in this series to be competitive. Graham is great at driving through the field, but I mean, if you qualify in the top 12, you don't have to drive through the field every race. So
right,
I think yes, you look at the lineup, and here's how I see it. Graham Rahal is a solid driver, right? He's finished 11th and 12th so far this season. But in terms of competing for a championship, I don't know if that's ever coming back.
He's not it.
Louis Foster is a guy who's a talented rookie. You obviously have to give him a shot. And I think the team made a great hire in taking the risk and hiring him. It's going to take some time. I don't think anyone's expecting crazy results in year one. Devlin DeFrancesco, let's be honest, he brings a lot of money. He's shown some pace in qualifying at times. Racecraft is questionable, depending on the race. And unless he can develop I mean, you're looking at a lineup where you need to upgrade, like you said, you need to upgrade the talent level. And now, could that be Louis Foster breaking through in year 2? Maybe, right? I mean, if he turns into kind of the level of a Lundgaard, yeah, I think you feel pretty good with where you're at. But
you just got to hold on to him because you couldn't hold on to Lundgaard, you know?
Correct. So, and I mean, I don't think they're worried about that after 1 year, but you got to make sure you have good sponsorship, right? And you got to work on all these things. They went from being a team that had 3 very well-sponsored entries to needing to bring someone on who brought who basically brought all the money for that 3rd seat in Devlin DeFrancesco. So that's a big shift after you lose Hy-Vee. So they're kind of at a crossroads here. And look, I think they're a team that can be competitive again. It's just a matter of what do they need to do to figure out qualifying and what do they need to do to improve the driver lineup? Because you look at it and I mean, they were like at the top of the non-big 3 teams going back, 2019, 2020, right? And even 21, they were kind of there as well. Pato was starting to break through for McLaren at that time, but they're very much there. And it just seems like it's been downhill since then.
I mean, you look at Graham Rahal, close to 300 starts between IndyCar and kart, and he has 6 wins. I mean, he is who he is. And that's not knocking him. I mean, you know what Graham Rahal is going to give you and not give you. And it's almost as simple as me as looking at the previous offseason with Alexander Rossi available. They say that would have been a guy, in my mind, that would have he immediately would have become the best driver at Rahal if he would have been brought in there. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if that dynamic works as long as Graham Rahal is in the seat because of who he is, because of his dad and how involved with the team he is. And maybe even Alexander Rossi looked at it as well. Now the influx of cash to ECR helps, but that's as simple as if Alexander Rossi goes to RLL, he immediately raises the bar of that team. Ends up at ECR. And those are the kind of things that I don't know if Rahal Letterman Lanigan can get over in terms of within the paddock is the discussion. Well, if you go to Rahal, you're going to be number 2, no matter what. And is that holding them back in terms of landing some better driver talent?
And you look at the last time the team was truly in the title fight, and I have to correct Marshall Pruitt here of Racer. He said Buddy Rice in 2004. I have to correct him. Graham Rahal was very much in the title fight in 2015, but that was in his prime era of 2015, 16, right. 17, where he won the bulk of the races in his career and was competing up front. So, look, it's not like they're a completely lost team. They've had some lost seasons of late, but the ability's there. And Graham even said as much in a separate Racer article that, he considered stepping away full-time, and then now he says I've probably got 2 or 3 good years left as a full-time driver in the series. So this is we're looking at the future here, and we want to hold on to Jay Frye and see if he can take us back to where we want to be long-term.
It definitely is a home run hire. You just wonder how big of the scope of control that Jay Frye will have. Can he have the difficult conversations, make the difficult decisions that I feel need to be made for this team to return to a consistent race-winning, contending team? And I think it starts with the drivers. There's always a need, obviously, for more money. I think Jay Frye's relationships, hopefully for ROO, will allow them to land a couple, maybe season-long sponsors upcoming. But I look at that team and just that lineup leaves a lot to be desired. And I think the upgrades for that team that need to be made are considerable, but I think that's the most obvious one.
Yeah, I think so too. And then just continuing to bolster people behind the scenes, right? Your engineers, your mechanics, increase your marketing, right? I mean, look, no one's a better marketer for IndyCar in terms of a driver than Graham Rahal, right? He's done an excellent job at marketing. They just need people to help him out with that.
Yeah. Well, and two is you mentioned just qualifying for them. It still seems like more often than not, Rahal comes off the hauler behind and really chasing it. And is that a caliber of driver that can't adjust to different situations? I think it's partly, but also to the point that this team still needs behind-the-scenes help. And, if you're chasing it from practice one on, you're going to have a struggle for the weekend unless you just figure it all out in a short amount of time. And I think for Rahal, too, even we saw it in the first two races in practices, and Graham just not comfortable, is they just need to be better off the truck, so to speak. And I think some of that goes to the driver talent. I think some of that, too, goes behind the scenes. So if Jay Frye can help them land some of those big-time sponsors that give them an influx of cash, that allows them more personnel, more, rig time, all that stuff, and sim time, then that's definitely going to help. So we'll see the impact. It's a great hire. It's awesome to see Jay Frye still in the paddock. We both agreed that it was a mistake for him to be ousted, and now he lands. And not only that, I think he's a respected voice in the paddock, too. I think that really helps, too. It'll be interesting, though, the conversations with those, ownership / team principal president meetings in IndyCar after Jay Frye was shown the door by the series.
Yeah, no doubt. That will be a very interesting
Hey, look who's back,
factor.
Right? That'll be awkward.
Yeah, so true. So true. We move forward to the news that Roger Penske confirming, this is a relief, that the new car will be debuted for the 2027 season. This came during the media bullpen, if you will, during the IMS Museum grand reopening earlier this week as we record on Friday, April 4th. This is a positive sign. The car's in design. It's in the wind tunnel. He said, our plan is to bring in that car in 2027. Said it'll look like an Indy car. It'll be safer. They're looking at speed, ability to take some weight out of the car, which all the teams want. And then, of course, we'll have hybrid technology, which that last aspect is interesting because of what we shared the other week, where it seems like the shift is coming away from hybrid. Look, F1's looking at V10s again, potentially. So
right.
I find it interesting, and hybrid may be the stipulation to keep Honda for the short term. Now, will we see hybrid long term? I don't think so. I think the hybrids will probably be gone after a year or two of this new car.
I always feel like IndyCar is kind of like me with fashion. Is I'm always like one season behind or whatever. I just, my wife tells me, especially when I was younger, trying to catch, stay with fashions, and she's like, that's like, last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I'm like, I feel like that's IndyCar, right? Is they're always just a little behind in what's current within the paddock and within auto racing. So there's some interesting comments again from Marshall Pruitt in the mailbag this week about the hybrid, and it was all the rage, and it did seem like that's the direction that a lot of these auto companies were going. But now that you see the electrification of people buying hybrids and stuff, it's kind of apexed at 10, 12, 15%. The people that have wanted those cars have bought those cars, right? We're not seeing a continuing influx. And so that's why, auto companies are kind of being a little bit more hesitant in the future. But did you take this announcement? First of all, anytime that Roger Penske can talk about the series is great. I wish we had more of that.
Yes.
Right? Did you feel this was more an edict to the series and those developing the car that, hey, you need to get this done by 2027? I kind of felt that way.
I take it more of he's heard the other comments, this is what's happening kind of thing. Maybe not so much as you viewed it an edict, but more of like, no, I'm setting the record straight. We will have a new car in 2027.
But I think it was not only to the public, but also maybe to his team that is developing this, like, hey, you guys need to have this done by 2027, because it wasn't very long ago that Mark Miles was talking about 27/28, and do we start coming out with pieces of the new car throughout 2027, which is a horrible idea. I almost felt like this was as much to the public as much as it is to his people underneath him to say, hey, no, this is happening. You guys need to get it done come 2027, this thing is rolling out, and you all need to have it ready. So I think it's a kick in the pants to his people to make sure this happens, but also maybe alleviating the rumors and the talk within the paddock and within the IndyCar community that, hey, does this thing get pushed off another year, or do we see kind of like a pseudo new car pieces, which is just silly. So I think it was Roger kind of laying down the law, so to speak, to everyone and say, hey, this thing is coming, and it's coming in 2027, and y'all need to be ready.
It's a positive development, to say the least, because it felt like kicking the can down the road again, as IndyCar has seemingly done with things, like we saw with the hybrid, and now that got delayed so much, and part of that is, the pandemic and supply chain, but then it just kept getting delayed. And now it feels like it's for sure going to happen, and they have a timeline, and it seems positive.
And it gives your team owners a clear path and knowing when this thing is coming, so they can plan financially and everything else. And that's the biggest thing is your team owners need to know what's coming and when, and all the rumors, all the conjecture, all the discussion, this firmly lays it out that, hey, 2027, we're gonna debut this thing, which means you think you'd have, in my opinion, a show car by the end of the season, and hitting track, by early next year for testing at the very latest, because you want to run this thing through its paces at every conceivable track that IndyCar goes to. So I think it's huge, and it's definitely huge for the team owners knowing, okay, this is when it's coming. Now you just need to tell them how much they're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah, well, that's a separate issue.
Yeah, right. Hopefully they have some intel on that, on just what they're looking at. But, more information you can give them, the better. And I think now that they're like, okay, we have to buy X amount for 2027, they can start really getting their financials in order.
So all in all, a good thing. And speaking of the museum, since that's where this update was made, it looks incredible, right? I mean, the grand reopening was back on April 2nd. Again, you got to reserve your spot, but you have the Penske room, right, with all his baby Borgs, and you have last year's front row of like the cars, which looks really cool, of all Penske. Obviously, it's not just a Penske shrine, right? But there are a lot of other cars. They have like a redone gasoline alley, a lot of interactive stuff. They have some sims. When they announced this whole thing, I thought, looks cool, not going to happen on the timeline that they said. So something tells me that Roger Penske certainly helped to make this come together on time. Secondly, I feel like this has exceeded any expectation that I had for the museum. Now, obviously, got to go see it, but it looks incredible. 17-month, $16.5 million renovation. I mean, they spent the money, they did the work. Everything looks, dare I say, Penske perfect.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Now, you mentioned that front row. Now, is that going to rotate per season for like last year, for this year's front row? Next year, it'll have the cars in those liveries?
I'm not sure.
I'm wondering. I haven't said to see that, but that would be cool. But no, there was a couple videos I saw where they had like walkthrough videos of it, and it just looked incredible. Even had, you mentioned some sims. It had, some kids areas. And
you can change a tire.
Can you? Wow.
Apparently, yeah.
They don't have the hydraulic gun, do they, out there, which would be pretty wild. But no, it looks first rate. It's tremendous. The old museum, if you were into cars, was amazing. And I for you and I, we could walk around there and it was great. But, to the casual fan, the casual interest person going to Indianapolis Motor Speedway, it just didn't have that panache. It didn't have that grab that grabbed your attention. This does. And it's absolutely tremendous. It's first rate. It's pretty cool, and can't wait to visit.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to it, that the museum's been redone. And one other main topic, speaking of the 500, Prime Video is going to be a sponsor for Kyle Larson and the 1,100 miles, the Indy 500, the Coke 600 that he's doing. There'll be a presenting sponsor on both his IndyCar and his Cup car. And also, they'll air a feature-length documentary next year that's focused around last year's attempt and this year's attempt. Pretty big to get Prime on board, which Prime trying to promote their NASCAR offerings just because, well, they're going to have NASCAR races this summer. So I think that's pretty cool, though, to see Prime as a sponsor at the Speedway. The livery had already been leaked as far as diecast stuff going a while back.
Right.
But Hendrick Car's the primary sponsor of that entry. A couple other quick notes on the museum. So the official store is open 7 days a week, 9 to 5. It's been reimagined. I saw that they have like milk bottle chandelier on the top, which is kind of fun.
I did see that today.
You don't need a museum ticket to check out the store. And then the photo room, which was part of the old museum, always a highlight, that's been moved across the street onto 16th Street.
Oh.
And you can go in and still check that out, purchase photos and view different things, but still a part of it. It's just been moved. It's not on the same property, but it's right across the street. That was always a favorite of mine to check out. You go upstairs, you take the elevator and look at the old photos and different things. So still a part of it, just across the street.
Well, when you're not expanding the footprint of the museum with any more square footage, you have to make some decisions, and you had to utilize that space for other things, particularly, with the open concept, even on the second level with the new museum's setup. So makes sense that they had to move that. Glad that it found a home, and I'm sure plenty of people will wander over 16th Street to check out the photos.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we kind of covered the big things. We'll get to other items in news and notes that I think are pretty interesting as well. But if you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us on your favorite social media platform, IndyCar Podcast on Instagram, on Twitter /X, on Facebook. Just search for New Track Record. You can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. Support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. And as always, download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So a short mailbag this week. Update from Lynn_IndyCar on the trading card. So he said he got his first week of the Pronto IndyCar cards for 2025, and kind of it goes through. It comes with a pole winner, race winner, podium, biggest mover, fastest lap, 3 for Abel, Foster, and Schwartzman, and a Prima Racing card of the cars. Limited production run of 237 cards for week 1. So to clarify,
so every week they're coming out with cards based on the race, I guess the previous race.
Also, he pointed out to you that Scott Dixon has a title by the Queen of the United Kingdom. This is obviously when the Queen was alive, that he is Sir Scott. Just a reminder to you.
Lynn's always got to update us with the Sir Scott news.
Yes. This from Poet Shevchenko said, listening to last week's podcast, here's a bold idea that thermal with its inherently low capacity allows for IndyCar. Make it a 9 a.m. local, noon Eastern race so Fox doesn't have to make the hard choice of scheduling their broadcast. Well, Fox said they weren't going to do that. It wasn't really on the table. NBC tried that, remember, last year. So, right. I mean, I love the idea. I think if thermal is back, which we'll get an update, at least on what Marshall Pruitt thinks on that coming up in news and notes, but I get the idea. I like the idea. They tried it last year, but for a points-paying race, they decided not to do it, and I guess that just makes it is what it is.
Yeah, I just feel like, for the TV rating, I guess it would help. Would it help the show, though? I guess, would it help the event? Not much, in my opinion. I still think it's a woefully inadequate track to host IndyCar, and that it has zero, feeling of being an event and excitement. And unless you're letting significantly more people in, I just don't see how that changes.
Yeah, I agree. Couple of thoughts on Jay Frye. Hunter's Way 67 said, my guy is back. Stoked for Jay and RLL. Also, this from Lynn_IndyCar. Saying the news fairy showed up about Jay Frye, not in April Fool's, which, right? They make the announcement on April 1st.
April 1st, you know?
And everyone's like, hey, not an April Fool's joke. This is legit.
Yes.
But just kind of funny. But he said, how big of an impact will Jay have on RLL, especially with their 500 qualifying, because hiring Sato is almost knocking out one of your full-time cars based on the last 2 years of qualifying. He said, great move. How will it impact? Well, I mean, we talked about it. I think in terms of an engineering side, right, I don't know if there's much of an impact. But in terms of hiring talent, right, and getting the right people in place, I think that's where the impact is. And I am hopeful that this will lead to them improving their personnel across the board. And then we aren't talking about them fighting for, the last row shootout. But we'll see. He can't fix everything right now, right before Bay. We're looking at a month and a half out. I'm not expecting that. But long term, I think that's where the improvement is made.
No, precisely. He's not going to make much of an impact in 6 weeks, especially on track, outside of maybe landing a couple sponsorship deals or something like that. But long term, this time next year, maybe we're looking back and say, this is what's been accomplished by RLL on the track and behind the scenes with Jay Frye effectively in control. So I think this is a long-term play, and we'll see how it impacts the team, hopefully in a good light going forward. But I think it's going to take a while.
Yes. No, I think it will as well. A couple other notes on the mailbag. This was prior on the new car stuff, talking about last week's episode. Indy Oreo said, at least I'll have a new car to drive interest in 28 or 29. And then Hickey 93, so we'd posted our random split air driver of the week on the socials. And he said the Jason Bright split driver of the week. Had to look him up because that was perhaps the most random name I have ever seen on the random split air driver of the week. So impressive find. By Matt for us on that one. So that wraps up the mailbag pretty quick. Not really a surprise. We dive into news and notes and several Long Beach related things. First off, you have some sponsor announcements. Fleet Cost and Care will be the primary for Graham Rahal. Root Insurance will be the primary for Marcus Armstrong. Starting at Long Beach, also will include Detroit, Laguna Seca, and Nashville. Root Insurance was a sponsor with Marcus last year for some races at Ganassi. We had the guys from the facility of Fox Sports 1 get a 2-seater ride. They also met up with Colton Herta. And then some IndyCar drivers, including Colton Herta, swapped helmets with Long Beach firefighters who helped the Eaton and Palisades fires that tore through L.A., so that's a very cool partnership. And then speaking of more drivers, Colton Herta was on board along with Colin Brown of Meyer Shank's IMSA program at the Anaheim Ducks game earlier this week. So a lot of promotion leading into it. It's hard to believe that, they're already doing 2-seater rides.
Yeah, right. Just pretty wild, but everybody full steam ahead for Long Beach and looking forward to it. I feel like we're due after a relatively calm first 2 races in terms of on-track shenanigans. I feel like maybe Long Beach is where that streak ends. I'm feeling like the angst is going to come out, especially with the 3-week break. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, the 3-week break, yes, I fully agree. So the facility on FSON, by the way, Emmanuel Acho, LaShawn McCoy, former NFL players, also Chase Daniel. I'm not sure if he's with the show, but he got a 2-seater ride as well. He is with the facility. So former
quarterback at Missouri?
Yes.
Where Chase Daniel was?
Yeah. And long-time backup quarterback in the NFL. Got
Correct.
a good career, 14 years out of it. So, but pretty very cool. Nice. We're seeing more and more partnerships between Fox and IndyCar. They're doing a great job. We just need to see the results come together. All right, so that's some Long Beach stuff. Speaking of schedule, Marshall Pruitt had an update on the 2026 schedule. And before that, in the mailbag, he said And the Racer.com mailbag, I will be surprised if Thermal returns as a championship race, not unless another race falls off the schedule. So there's that aspect going in. But his article, I mean, obviously St. Pete will probably open the season. Arlington is March 13th through 15th. And then after that, it's kind of like, well, what changes? And they could delete one of the Iowa doubleheader races. Mark Miles said that Thermal is in the conversation, but they've not decided. He said, I think it met or exceeded our expectations. We'll see. I mean, obviously, you're going to say positive things while you're still negotiating, right? I mean, that's just
right.
Common sense. Also said we didn't love the audience numbers that we got, so keep that in mind. But they could maybe go back as, for preseason testing. You look across the article, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of groundbreaking stuff in this. Obviously, Marshall mentions the factors of, the World Cup and how that will impact with Fox having the tournament, which is June 11th through July 19th. So that could knock out several weekends and give us a big summer gap. Or, depending on how it's scheduled, could be either leading into a World Cup game or coming out of a World Cup game, which if IndyCar can even just get that one time, I think that will be big.
Yeah, I feel like it's obviously they've talked about, they're all going to be network races still next year, even with the World Cup. I think you have to get creative in terms of maybe some races having to move dates, but also in terms of lead-ins or coming out of World Cup matches. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the schedule comes together. You and I are agreeing, though, just the lack of update about a Mexico race in that story was a little bit perplexing.
Yes.
Considering the expectation for years now is next year, the following year we'd be in Mexico somewhere. There's not a lot in terms of discussion, or at least in that story, about that race appearing in 26.
Yeah, Mark Miles said, we're making good progress, talking about a race at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. He said, I believe it will become a thing. If it became a thing, it has the potential to help us in that time of year. It would be like Toronto. It's part of the championship. So that's all that's on Mexico City. I thought it was interesting that Denver was mentioned before Mexico City. That proposed event could happen as soon as 2026, no sooner than 2027. Miles wasn't willing to provide clarity. Pruitt goes on to surmise 2027 a better fit. And then you have other events that are in their final years of their contract, Portland and Laguna Seca. There's really no further discussion that Pruitt got out of Miles on those. But yeah, I mean, the way I see it, if you can add Mexico City, you add that. You drop Thermal, maybe get rid of one of the doubleheaders at Iowa, and then that's probably about it, right? I mean, you've already added 2 new races. You drop Thermal, and you drop one at Iowa, and we're looking at 17 again, correct?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that Iowa drops one as soon as next year. When you look at Denver, let's say to 2027, I mean, where does that fit in? Do you feel like it fits in summertime?
Yeah, it's not going to be
maybe
before
early fall-ish.
Not going to be before the Indy 500. Is that? I mean, we look at Nashville. If Nashville can keep drawing crowds, that's great. But do we look at Denver as maybe a potential, toward the end of the season or season finale? I mean,
I think
that's where I look at it on the schedule.
As much as we've talked about the events before the 500, Thermal in particular not delivering in terms of the event feel, you kind of get that sense at the end of the schedule. Nashville was a success for year one for sure at the Oval last year, and of course when it was downtown. But you go to Portland, you go to Laguna Seca. It's just kind of like you're trying to drum up really interest down the stretch, and those places just kind of lack an event feel. I mean, could Denver slide in there somewhere as a big event heading into the stretch run or during the stretch run? I'm not really sure. I'm just wondering what fits best with Denver and everybody out there in IndyCar. I feel like that would be a worthy addition, I think, to the back end of the schedule if all the schedules aligned.
Yeah. I think Denver would be at the end. I think that's where it fits as opposed to middle of the summer. But, I mean, we'll see. There's a lot of time left to figure out the schedule, and I like you said, I'm nervous about Mexico City because that was not much of an update on that event.
No, not at all. But, one thing that Mark Miles did reaffirm is we're at 17 races. So for everybody that likes to put together their pseudo schedule for the future that's more than 17 races, once again, Mark Miles putting the kibosh on that. And I think that really comes from the paddock. I think the paddock has said, and we've read about this for a while, is we're maxed out at 17 races unless there's a significant influx in income. And I think maybe potentially if the Fox deal helps with ratings and then sponsorships, then maybe in a couple years the paddock is more receptive to, hey, 18, 19 events. But I think that's an edict that has come from the paddock and say we can't do more than 17. And then Mark Miles continues to reaffirm that.
Yes. Elsewhere, a couple nuggets from the mailbag. Marshall Pruitt had this interesting point. So Prima got penalized as a team. Colton Herta, the entries of Colton Herta and Robert Schwartzman got penalized. But his wording here is fascinating because I didn't think about it like this. He said, I was told by an official that no harm was done, so no in-race penalty, talking about the Felix Rosenquist running over the gun, the air hose.
The gun, yeah.
At the pit stop. And he said, not sure that's the best way to uphold a high level of expectations. And he said also on the wonky application rules/penalties, Colton Herta and Robert Schwartzman weren't docked any points in the Drivers' Championship because the technical compliance violations on their cars were non-competition items. What? So, and then he goes on to say...
And Marshall Pruitt was, everything on the car is a competition item, right?
Yes. So, the teams were fine. They lost entrant points, running over wheel guns and two cars being illegal. Again, apparently... not really an issue. I found that fascinating because I didn't think about it like that. But he's got a point.
We talked about it last week about the running over the wheel gun. Like, when is that not an automatic penalty?
It used to be.
And Marshall Pruitt had the same question.
Apparently it no longer is. It's just a post-race
apparently no
fine.
longer is. So we always talk about IndyCar rules not being as black and white as they should be. That was as black and white as can be, and for some reason they've changed it. I don't understand. You run over something in your pit, it's a penalty. Now, apparently, it's not always a penalty, which then opens you up to criticism, right? So if driver A, team A, doesn't get a penalty, but driver B, team B, does, it's silly. I don't understand creating something messy when you don't have to.
Yeah, so Prima got a $25,000 fine, lost 10 entrant points on the number 83, which is Schwartzman's entry. The car was in breach of its technical regulations for a safety infraction.
Basically, it started on fire due to a fuel leak.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
I guess that's a penalty warranted, but I think, the penalty was, burning up the inside of the car was significant enough. But, the wheel gun thing just makes no sense to me because it's always been a penalty, and now apparently it's not.
Let's talk a couple of sponsor things. Arrow McLaren announced a multi-year extension with longtime partner Stratasys. And then this one I really want to talk more about because I think it's really cool. Meyershank Racing has forged a partnership with St. Thomas University, which is based in Miami. And the way this will work, it's not just an engineering thing. Yes, they'll have students throughout this month of April who will be a part of the IndyCar program and will kind of be hands-on. Their STU Big Data Analytics, STU is St. Thomas University for clarification, but their Big Data Analytics students will work hand in hand with MSR's IndyCar and IMSA engineering staff. So it's an engineering thing. But then this is cool. The fashion, merchandising, and design students will have the opportunity to design and create a special edition race suit utilizing team and series guidelines. They'll present their designs to the team for a chance to have Marcus Armstrong, who will drive the number 66 Honda, sponsored by St. Thomas University, for the race at Milwaukee Mile in August. He'll actually wear the suit during the race. So not just a St. Thomas University livery, but he'll wear the race suit. And then this is where it goes next level. Culinary students at the school will create a race-specific sports drink designed with flavors of tropical Miami in mind. 3 flavors will be created. Inspiration will be the drivers themselves during a race. So it's not just an engineering partnership. You have They'll also do an emphasis on sports administration, communications, and marketing as well with a symposium at the end of April with MSR leadership. So this is across the board a really cool thing, and we're thinking just beyond engineering for IndyCar. And I think that's important here.
We talk about sponsorship and activation and unique ways that sponsors and partners can really benefit both sides to deals within the sport. And this is as unique as it comes. And it's pretty cool to see, because when you bring on sponsors, they want bang for their buck as well. And the activation is key. And not only are they getting, signage and attention, it's their students are able to be involved in things like this. I think it's really cool and really unique and really exciting to see from Meyer Shank.
The hands-on aspect where you're introducing people to IndyCar who may not have ever heard of IndyCar, probably haven't been to an IndyCar race, probably have never watched an IndyCar race. I think that's the part that's exciting as well. You're getting exposure if you're Meyer Shank, but you're also getting exposure if you're IndyCar. So I feel like everyone benefits to this really, really cool partnership.
Yeah, no doubt. It's really, really cool to see. And I can't wait to see that suit, man.
Yeah. Hey, maybe the sports drink, maybe there's a way to get it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Couple updates on thermal viewership from beyond, the race, which we went in depth last week. Tyler Wong, 65, always providing numbers beyond just race day. Saturday, practice 2. Again, practice 2 on Saturday, 144,000. Qualifying also on FS1, 155,000. Warm-up on Sunday on FS1 got 90,000. So continuing to see very promising practice and qualifying numbers, a lot higher than I would have guessed. And then Michael Mulvihill, who is with Fox Sports, he's insights and analytics for Fox, had a couple of interesting tweets. Now, he had talked originally, about, thermal and the rating, kind of went a little bit in depth. He said, seeing a lot of defensiveness about this Broadway Fair story, talking about Nathan Brown's story from last week. On this week's IndyCar rating, the number wasn't surprising. A lot being said about NASCAR competition, but I think the much bigger factor was 11 million people watching men's and women's college basketball. He goes on to say, the one factor I think was been a little overblown is the comparison to F1. Most of that viewing is happening on a time-shifted basis via DVR, which doesn't mean it's not real viewing, but it's a bit misleading to say F1 beat Indy at 3 a.m., which that is a good perspective point, right? They're getting people watching in the morning, right, when they wake up, or you get 24 hours after an event airs for those time-shifted DVR things to count in ratings, as far as I understand. And then he goes on to...
But real quick, let's say it this way. So if fans are also being pulled away to March Madness and NASCAR, they have 24 hours to watch the IndyCar race if they DVR'd it.
And they did
so
not
it goes
see
both
the
ways.
need. It does.
I mean, you can't defend it and say, well, Formula One, they can watch in 24 hours. Well, yeah, so can IndyCar fans if they were watching basketball.
True. And then one other point that he said, we're up 21% comparing two broadcast races last year. The real benefit of this deal won't be felt until we compare a couple of broadcast races to races that were cable streaming last year. After Long Beach, we'll be up something like 50%. I'll take it. Yeah, because Long Beach wasn't on network last year.
Yeah, I know, but it's common sense. Of course the ratings are going to be up on the network. But I think what Marshall Pruitt mentioned, I think in the mailbag, was one of the numbers that the team owners are really looking at is $1 million per race, every race outside of the Indianapolis 500. That's what they want to see.
Yes.
$1 million plus.
And to be
they've
fair,
gotten well over it one race and well under it one race.
To be fair, that's what they should
not an
expect.
Average. That's what Marshall Pruitt said. They're not talking about an average. They're talking about every race they want to see $1 million plus.
And thermal being so far below, and I get the competition aspect, but I think that's a huge factor in whether or not it's back, because if you're not drawing eyeballs on TV, you're already not getting eyeballs at the track. That's a big factor. Huge factor.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've talked about it, and I think other people maybe don't value it as much, is the eye test, the appealing, you see previews of thermal and people are like, I don't even know where the hell that is. I think there is a certain amount of people that identify with certain tracks and certain events and want to tune in. Casual fans, not diehards. I think there was no poll, there's no hook for thermal. When people say, like, I don't know where the hell thermal is. So,
whereas with Long Beach,
combination of things,
it's
but
the opposite, where it's like, oh, Long Beach, yeah, I know where that is.
Right? Yeah.
It's a marquee
I know
event.
where that is. So, yeah, it's a combination of things, but I thought it was interesting that we're not talking an average, and this is from Marshall Pro. We're not talking an average, which is so many people like to throw out there, including Fox. They're talking about every event getting at least 1 million viewers, and they've gotten it once and they haven't gotten another. Like, we'll see going forward what the trend is. Is it more trending towards St. Pete or trending towards thermal or somewhere in the middle, which I think team owners would be happy with. Just get 7 figures every race. And you've done it once, you need to do it 15 more times, not counting thermal.
Yes. This from Nathan Brown talking about, so Ed Carpenter Racing and Alexander Rossi and apparently Cracker Barrel is on board as a sponsor, but goes into detail about how this came about. So Rossi said at St. Pete, he met someone married to a member of the Cracker Barrel marketing team at the Nashville finale last year. And then he talked about it on Off Track, the podcast with him and Hinch, about how much he loves Cracker Barrel. So the company looked up via his rewards membership, his purchase history, and how often he frequents the restaurant. He said he went, quote, an obnoxious amount, end quote, during hybrid testing at Homestead, and the deal was born.
Are you so we actually had this conversation on the drive down to Florida. Are you a Cracker Barrel guy?
I do like Cracker Barrel.
Me too.
I'm trying to think of
the
last time I ate it. I want to say it was like a year ago or so.
Okay.
What's funny is there's a Cracker Barrel at the exit where I work at that I drive by all the time. But I mean, I'm there to call a game and come back home. So I've eaten there once, but not since I started working at this job. So I do love Cracker Barrel. I may order breakfast anytime.
Yes.
The number of times I've gotten quote unquote real food, that's how I call it, aka non-breakfast food, is probably on one hand, because I always want to get breakfast at Cracker Barrel. No, I enjoy Cracker Barrel.
I feel like it's kind of like IHOP. Like, you go to IHOP to get breakfast.
Yeah, except I don't think I've been to an IHOP in like 7 years.
Really?
Yeah. But I've been to a Cracker Barrel within the last year or so.
For sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's
Cracker
cool.
Barrel is like anytime. Like, you can have your country gravy and all that stuff. Like, I'm there to get breakfast.
Yeah. Give me pancakes or French toast.
Sausage and eggs.
Eggs. Yeah. You give me biscuits with jam or apple butter. I'm hungry.
Clutch.
Yes. I'm hungry. Okay. Let's sprint to the finish. And Ari Lindyk's new book is available on his website, official-ari-lindyke.com. You can check it out on products, but his book available now. The NASCAR Fontana plans they've hit pause. This is the least shocking thing I've ever seen. Their redevelopment of Fontana to a short track on pause. Yeah, because the real estate's too valuable. Let's be honest.
I mean, that's been the story since the beginning when they started tearing it up was, well, this isn't going to happen. And
no.
Shockingly, finally, years after, they come out and say, yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
The IMS Fan Fest, it was in Evansville last weekend. It's coming to Fort Wayne this week, or excuse me, not this week, but on Tuesday from 5 to 8 p.m. At Electric Works. So I can't remember my schedule. I'm pretty sure I have to work that night with a game. So otherwise, I would come out there if I am available. But
we did the show there last year, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
For the podcast?
We did. Had a chance to chat with Doug Bowles. So that was the Penske Turbo Gate or whatever. So, or Push to Pass Gate.
That's right.
So we had plenty to talk about out there for that show. Actually, I don't have a game, but I bet I will. I bet it'll be rescheduled to that day.
Yeah, it's been a week of cancellations for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, just today, but stuff's been moved around, and I fully expect it to happen. But if not, I will try to get out there, and if you see me, if I do get out there, please say hi. And this, couple other things before we get to our random split air driver of the week and tweet of the week. J.R. Hildebrand. So remember when he was supposed to take an IndyCar up Pikes Peak a couple years ago?
Yes.
So he provided some new details, saying this was very nearly real in 2022. Car, crew, tires, budget, all there. IndyCar engine dev, ultimately too heavy a lift due to lack of intercooling. Source an alternate engine solution for 23 that would have been even, made it work. One of IndyCar's major partners vetoed, so it was a stalemate. And then he added the car was going to be a mashup of the universal aero kit / aero screen midsection, side pods, engine cover, etc. All been reconfigured by then, but aero kit era front, rear wings, and full diffuser. Gears were turning to go to Bonneville too. Indy Pikes, the Salt Flats, all in 1 year. So unfortunately, didn't work out.
I would have just wanted to see that thing,
right?
Not just racing, but just see that car.
Yeah,
would have been pretty crazy.
Would have been really cool. Anything that we missed?
I don't think so. Some interesting comments from Marshall Pruitt in the mailbag regarding Fox's coverage and basically how important Long Beach is for the production team.
Yes.
Little errors, big errors, stuff like that. I think from what Marshall Pruitt is that they've used their 2 mulligans or 1 mulligan, and now they really start having to start delivering. They've done a great job advertising, promoting, but in terms of presentation, they have some things to fix. And I think with a 3-week break and in race 3 now, okay, let's start putting together some bangers production-wise.
And one thing I forget about, Fox Sports is based in L.A., so yeah, the thermal thing happening the way it did is pretty shocking. And now Long Beach is, like you said, it's their chance to get it right before fans really, really get upset about the coverage. I can deal with timing and scoring being down during practice sessions and stuff like that, but race day, just get race day right.
Well, and even, somebody mentioned it too about the qualifying, not having, live timing and scoring on a lap.
Yeah.
And, you remember, the Christmas tree during qualifying on NBC where, half of the were in red and half of the green. Things we took for granted at the time that were now like, this should be basic stuff and things that Fox hasn't figured out yet. So it's going to be a big weekend next weekend for Fox all around in terms of making sure they put together a really, really good production.
All right, tweet of the week time as we've covered everything else, and it's from Tony Kanon. Thank you, Dr. David Liardson, spelled Liardson, for the hair transplant. A new TK is born. Thanks, Rubens Barrichello, for the referral. Obviously, it was his April Fool's post, and I thought it was really funny. He's got a full head of hair in one picture after the hair transplant image on the other side. But I thought that was great.
It almost looked Chia Pet-esque.
Yes. And in fact, I think someone replied as such. I thought that was great. All right, our random split era driver of the week.
All right, we're going to the late 90s, early 2000s IRL and going with Donnie Beechler.
Ooh, I know Donnie Beechler.
Very much so. So a native of Springfield, Illinois, he raced in 36 races in the IRL from 1998 to 2002. His best career finish was third, achieved twice, once at the 2000 race at Phoenix and the 2001 race at Kansas. And through several years, he was with Cahill Auto Racing 98 to 99 and 2000 as well, and then raced partially for Foyt in 2001. And 2002 attempted to qualify for the Indianapolis 500 and did not qualify. Overall, 4 starts in the Indianapolis 500 for Donnie Beechler. His best start was 15th in 2000, and that was also his best finish of 12th in 2000. his final on-track race in the IRL, outside of attempting that Indy 500 in 2002, was a fifth place at Chicagoland in 2001. Interestingly, he won the Chili Bowl Nationals in 1995, and he returned to USAC Silver Crown on a part-time basis post-IRL racing. Now, this is the best thing I found on Donnie. He is an avid roller skater and competed like at the national level of roller skating.
That's interesting. Are you good at roller skating?
What's that?
Are you good at roller? Like, did you go to the roller rink back in the day, like for birthday parties and stuff?
You know, every time it was like hit and reset. Like, I would go struggle for a little bit, then get going, felt pretty comfortable, and then we wouldn't come back for like 6 months, and I'd come back and it was like back to square one. Now, when rollerblades became a big thing, and I played a lot of street hockey and stuff like that when I was a kid, I got pretty adept at inline skating. By no means an expert or anything, but it was always a struggle for me, regular roller skating, to hit the ground running. It was always, all right, I got to restart this. But put me in a street or a parking lot and inline skates, and I could get around pretty good.
Yeah, so I learned on rollerblades, like you said, also playing street hockey growing up, 10, 11, 12 years old or whatever, when they were popular late 90s. And I never roller skated, to my knowledge, until like college. And of course, there was like a roller rink in town. That was not something that, like I went ice skating growing up because there are ice rinks around and did that, once or twice, a lot of winters. But I never roller skated. And roller skating I found to be pretty hard. It took me a bit. I think I've only done it like twice, but I find it more challenging than ice skating.
Now, I, to my knowledge, have never ice skated.
Really?
I have, yeah. We had one rink in Fort Wayne for the longest time. It was at Glenbrook Square Mall, and it's now the food court. But that was the only ice skating rink when I was a kid in town, and I just never went ice skating.
Oh, see,
so I still haven't. So I can't compare it.
There were three that I went to growing up, mostly like in middle school and high school. There was the Carmel Ice Stadium, and then there was the Fisher's Forum, which I think is since closed, and then there's Arctic Zone in Westfield. So I had plenty of options.
People have like birthday parties and stuff there?
Yeah. Okay. Birthday parties, or you just go and hang out. I mean, it was just something to do besides going to the mall in the winter, because those are the movies. Like, those are your options, right? Or going to a basketball game. I mean, we don't have the levels of entertainment, 20 years ago that we do now.
That's true. I think in Fort Wayne, it was roller skating kind of like comparatively to your ice skating down there, because we had Roller Dome South, Roller Dome North. That's where kids would have their birthday parties and stuff like that. So we were more adept at roller skating because there were less opportunities for ice skating. So, pretty interesting, but neither of us could be able to handle Donnie Beechler on the roller skating rink. Apparently, he was pretty damn good.
Yeah, and I looked it up. He failed to make a qualifying attempt in 2002, which you go back to the old days, even during the split era, you would not believe how many people failed to qualify for the 2002 Indy 500. Robbie McGee waved off. Oriol Servia waved off. John Herb failed to make an attempt. Johnny Herbert was replaced by Mimo Gidley. Mimo Gidley failed to make an attempt. John DeVries replaced by Scott Harrington. Scott Harrington waved off. Donnie Beechler failed to make an attempt. Billy Rowe was bumped. Anthony Lazzaro was replaced by Jimmy Kite. And Jimmy Kite stalled during qualifying attempt and was replaced by Mark Dismore, who was the 33rd entry in the 33rd starting driver in the 2002 Indy 500.
Say what you want about the split era. It delivered in terms of bumping at the Indianapolis 500.
Yes, it did. Certainly did indeed. All right. Well, that covers everything. Enjoy the rest of your time in Pensacola Beach. We'll see you back in the studio next week, and we'll be back next week to preview Long Beach and cover all the news that happens throughout the week in IndyCar world. Plenty of news this week, surprisingly. We'll take it. But for Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch saying so long, and thanks for joining us on New Track Record Podcast.